Hello, and welcome to GradCast, the official radio show and podcast for the Society of Graduate Students here at Western University. I'm your host, Ariel.
And I'm Rosemary, Giles.
Today we have a guest from the Neuroscience department / program, Emily Davidson. Welcome, Emily.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Emily, first, can you tell us, where are you in your program, and generally, what do you study?
So I am in my first year of the master's program, the Neuroscience master's program here at Western. Just fresh off my undergrad and throw me into my master's.
Cool. So tell us which lab do you work with? So, as a neuroscience student, you're doing a research-based degree, and you're going to be doing a research project. Can you just tell us who do you work with, and what's the main aim of your project?
Yeah, so I'm actually in a really cool position because I have two amazing supervisors that are in really different departments. So one of my supervisors that I'm being co-supervised with is Dr. Jody Culham in the psychology department. And she, a lot of what she does is neuroimaging. So she's, we're taking pictures of the brain in the MRI and things like that there. And then the other supervisor that I have is Dr. Mike Anderson in the philosophy department. And he focuses a lot on the philosophy of neuroscience, and he's a huge proponent of embodied cognition. And so it's a really cool kind of a mix to get, both the psychology, the philosophy, and then, the neuroscience element in there as well. It's a really nice interdisciplinary mix that I just love. And so basically we have this really, it's kind of a wild project. We're putting people in the scanner and we're having them play Pac-Man. We wanted to kind of see, how video games might be used in order to get people in the scanner with something a little bit more engaging and interactive and dynamic than you normally get. So normally when you're in the MRI, they show you kind of stationary stimuli and, you kind of get bored, maybe doze off. And so it can be really hard to get a good picture of what the brain is doing when you're actually kind of interacting with something. And so we're really hoping that maybe this might be the new direction that neuroscience kind of goes in, to add more complexity, as if there wasn't enough already.
That's super interesting. So why is it that imaging will be better if you have people using active stimuli, or kind of what is the reason for wanting to make that change?
It's a good question. So one of the things that I think a lot of the neuroscience studies try and do now is isolate stimulus and response, right? So what is triggering brain activity? And then what is that brain activity causing you to do? Some kind of action, maybe it's pushing a button or whatever. They're trying to isolate these. And, it's really hard to do that because you can never truly isolate a stimulus and a response. It's always kind of this chain reaction of things causing you to act in the way you do. And then the way that you act then goes and causes you to, do something different than you might have done otherwise. And right, so it's kind of a feed forward feedback system that's really not represented anywhere, but for these studies that are really trying to capture dynamic cognition, and they're really few and far between, surprisingly.
So is this the first time that someone will have played a video game in a scanner like this?
No, it's not the first time, but it's the first time that people are playing video games in scanner where we're actually just looking at what their brain is doing while they're playing the game. So games have been used in the scanner on occasion. There's not very many studies, but it's not been to study functional, what we would call functional connectivity, which is just this the way that your brain is interacting in different networks and in different ways.
That's really interesting. So I'm just kind of trying to draw on personal experience here. I think that when you're doing this kind of scanning, like sometimes you'll be shown movies and stuff like that, correct? Okay, yeah. So then how is this different? Is it just a little bit more of active engagement, I guess, than just watching a movie? Just kind of, if you could touch on that.
Yeah, so that's a kind of a huge component of the research that we're doing. So one of the first things that we want to do with this study is we want to make sure that we're actually capturing something more than just watching a movie. So one of the things that we've been doing in this particular study is we're having people play Pac-Man, and then we're also having them watch their replay of Pac-Man. And we want to see, first of all, is there a difference between when they're playing Pac-Man and when they're just watching it passively. And if we find differences there, then this is something that can kind of communicate to the neuroscience community that, you know, it's not sufficient to just have people just be passive in the scanner. You know, there's something different that we're missing with this kind of feedback of action, and we need to be focusing on taking that into account when we're drawing conclusions and things like that.
It almost feels like you're combining the stimulus and the response. They're happening simultaneously and as they're going, instead of like kind of artificially chunked, like here's where the stimulus happens and here's where the response happens, which just never happens in real life. In real life, we're always being stimulated and responding all the time. So that's kind of cool. And maybe people are going to like it. I mean, have you played the game that you're going to play?
I was actually our very first kind of pilot participant. I went in the scanner and I played. And this is something that, you know, has been really great in terms of feedback that we've been getting. Everybody says that it is by far the most fun fMRI experiment that they've ever done. Normally, these kinds of MRI experiments can kind of be boring, you know, sitting in the scanner for, you know, an hour, just looking at, you know, pictures of black and white shapes or something. But yeah, this one is really engaging. And you can see that too, because we take all kinds of physiological metrics, heart rate, breathing, things like that. And, you know, you can see people getting really kind of riled up when they die in Pac-Man or when they're chasing a ghost and things like that. So it's really neat to kind of see that level of engagement that we're getting in the scanner.
That's very cool. I feel like I have to ask, why Pac-Man? Why that game? Why not something else?
Yeah, it's a nice place to start, I think, because it's fairly simple. And the other thing that Jody was kind of, you know, a lot of what she does is also kind of on the vision science end of things. She's really interested in the vision centers of the brain. And so she wanted something that maybe we could kind of, I don't want to use any technical jargon here, but it's something called a retinotopic map, where basically what we're hoping for is to kind of see in the brain, you know, if you're in this quadrant, the first quadrant, we might actually be able to see in the brain, oh, you know, there's signal in this part of the brain, and when they're in the second quadrant, it's kind of signal that's adjacent to that one, and we kind of see a map start to appear. Other studies have found things like this when looking at maps and where attention is when people are paying attention to a map. So we're kind of hoping maybe we can find something similar to that. And so Pac-Man seemed like a really great start for that, because it's a maze. And so you're constantly looking, you know, at kind of fixed targets in the maze and stuff. But what we've talked a little bit about is maybe kind of bringing in 3D games. If this study works out, bringing in 3D games, and then maybe even trying to eventually get portable neuroimaging technologies and combine them with artificial reality to kind of see, maybe we get, you know, some really great results. Maybe we see, you know, that you need to be moving around in order to capture the full signal, and even just having them in the MRI is only part of the picture.
This is really cool. Okay, so are there any concerns, I guess, with people not being good at gaming? Like, will that affect your results at all?
Yeah, actually, it is really interesting because we've had a lot of variability in terms of skill level. We do ask, you know, usually that people try playing Pac-Man a little bit before coming into the scanner, so that at the very least, you know, it's not them coming in and just kind of dying over and over again. Although we did have one of those anyways. So, you know, but in some ways it's good, because we want to try and capture brain activity for all different types of people. And so it is in some sense kind of a nice built-in control that we would have people who are you know, different levels in terms of gaming ability and stuff like that.
Actually, before our chat, I was like, I want to get ready for this. So I went and played the the Google Doodle version of Pac-Man, and as usual, always frustrated with that game. I can never get past like the second level. uh, I think I'm decent at video games, but Pac-Man's really difficult. um, I think one thing that occurs to me, along some of the same lines that of what Rose was asking earlier, like why this game? This game is similar to some other games, but also maybe different to certain video games. It feels like you are playing a certain character. It's not like you move particular things. You move this character, and now you kind of feel like the character is an extension of you. Just like if I hold a fork, and I poke, I can kind of feel the end of the fork. Now, while I'm holding the fork is me. And when I get in the car, I feel like where the end of the car is also me. Does that play into Pac-Man versus other games that you are the character when you're playing that character?
Well, I mean, we were kind of wondering that as well. We were really worried maybe that since the graphics are not kind of up to what video games are like now, and certainly nothing close to real life, we were worried that maybe people wouldn't get as embodied or immersed, and kind of feel like they are the Pac-Man, but it seems like people are, really getting into it. And so we're kind of hoping, since, this is one of the things that Mike Anderson's really interested in, this idea of embodied cognition. We've been looking a lot at trying to kind of figure out, when a person's playing a video game, even if it's something as simple as Pac-Man, are we still able to capture this embodied cognition where they truly believe that, not on a logical level, but, kind of just on this, emotional level in the moment? Do they kind of believe that this character is in some sense them? Are they activating the same motions, specific areas of the brain when they're moving up? Or, in whatever direction, or when they die, are they having, kind of this like response that's, heartbreaking somehow? We really wanted to know, is this a way to study cognition in a more embodied way, and is it going to work, right? And if we can get it for something as simple as Pac-Man, that really opens the door to all these different video games where you have, excellent graphics, or maybe even, artificial reality, right? If we can get in Pac-Man, we should be able to do an even better job with more advanced games.
Can you maybe unpack for us what is embodied cognition?
So embodied cognition is just this idea that, you're not just kind of a floating brain in the ether, right? Your body is contributing, the way you move your body, the way you're positioned, what you're doing in your environment. All of these things are contributing to how you think, and what kinds of decisions you might make, or how you perceive the world, right? So embodied cognition is just this idea that your cognition isn't just in your brain, it's really an extension of your brain, your body, and the environment interaction.
So I guess that goes to, when you look at something and you're just looking at it and you don't move your body at all, then that's like, you're going to think a lot differently than if you were looking at something and engaging with it and touching it and moving around it or something. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And just, when you're in an environment, and you're interacting with, say, if you see a picture of a baseball, right, you don't think that it never there's nothing implicit in there that you could grab that baseball and maybe throw it, or, just kind of toss it in the air or something like that. But when you see a baseball that just sitting on the desk, you might interact and perceive it very differently, just because there are things that you could actually do with that baseball, right? And so your environment and your body, and the way you're able to interact with all of the things around you, these are all things that we're really hoping to kind of look at and bring into neuroscience as important elements of studying cognition. It's not just seeing a picture of a baseball and getting that same experience that you would if it was actually in your hand.
This is all so interesting, and I feel like it's so new. I really love it. I am curious though, how did you come across this topic? Like, what got you interested in this?
Well, I mean, so I have always been really interested in video games and things like that. Like, I'm a big gamer myself. I used to do esports coaching as well, back before in the BC before COVID times, which was a really great experience. And one of the things that I really kind of learned from doing esports coaching is that people really do, embody themselves in these characters that they're playing, and the experiences and perceptions that they have in a video game are, they're unique in a sense, but they're also, we can understand them in the same way that we can understand how a person might be interacting in that environment as if it were real life. I know that sounds kind of strange, but just this idea of interactability in their particular virtual environment is something that really kind of stood out to me. And so it was like a beautiful moment of serendipity when I came to Western, and I wasn't entirely sure on what my project was going to be, because it's really can be quite difficult to merge philosophy and neuroscience sometimes, and get a project that really works for two supervisors. But then, only 2 days into being in my program, Jody mentioned about how using video games might be something that would be useful, and that they've already kind of thought about ways that they can implement this with Pac-Man, and so I kind of jumped on board that project, and it's been awesome kind of ever since, and I'm thrilled that I did.
Emily, where did you do your undergraduate degree?
I did my undergrad at York University. I did a cognitive science undergrad, which was technically, it was a weird program because it was technically in the philosophy department at York. But that's kind of where I got exposed to some of Michael Anderson's work, and I just absolutely loved it. I was really on the same page as him. It was really, kind of life-changing from my perspective of things. And so I really, I started reading more and more of it, and then I found out he was coming to our school to give us a talk about what he was doing in his lab. And from that moment, I emailed him right away and kind of said, I would love to come and be a part of your lab and this and that. So York is kind of where I was able to, get a budding interest in the more the marriage of philosophy and neuroscience together, instead of just kind of going in one direction or another.
So how did it end up the case that you had two supervisors, that you came to Western, first hearing about Mike Anderson, and then you ended up with a second supervisor too? How did that happen?
So apparently, I guess Michael Anderson's the only member of the core neuroscience team that is not technically in the neuroscience department. So in order to supervise a neuroscience student, he needed to have somebody else on board. I needed to have a co-supervisor that was in the department. And so I wasn't really sure, I talked to a few professors, but, I wasn't really sure, about it. Again, it's hard to marry philosophy and neuroscience. And so you're trying to ask them if there'd be any projects there that they'd be interested in. And then one of the labs at York that I was working at the time I was in the Vision Center for Vision Research there, and I had a really great PI, Dr. Ariel Freud, and his mentor was Jody Culham. And so he took a few of us to a conference in Niagara Falls to present a poster, and I met her there, and she was just like, she gave a roast of someone there, and she was hilarious. Like, her roast was fantastic. She was really funny and really personal. And it was like a stroke of sheer luck when I went and I talked to her, and I told her, I'm like trying to find a co-supervisor with Mike Anderson. She said, "Oh, I love Mike Anderson. We've been looking for a project to do forever." Oh my goodness. And so it was really, I just lucked out, and I'm so thrilled because both of them are fantastic. They're fantastic in the best ways.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
So I just want to clarify. So you came into your master's knowing that you wanted to do an interdisciplinary study.
Yeah.
Okay. You didn't know you were going to have two supervisors though, correct? Or did
That's
you kind of know that that might happen, or?
I did not know that that was going to happen. I thought it was going to be a really interdisciplinary kind of experience, just because Mike is he's looking at so many different things. He's in philosophy of neuroscience, but he also has people in his lab that are doing code and looking at machine learning and things like that. All these things that I had previously been interested in. Basically, all of his work brings them all together. And so I knew it was going to be an interdisciplinary kind of look at things, but I did not know that I would have two supervisors that were in different departments, and that, so that was a happy surprise, I guess.
That's cool how you managed to make that work. And it seems like the timing, I guess we're hopefully on the trail end of this pandemic here. But I hate to ask, like, how did you manage to get started with a master's in the midst of all this? What advice would you give to someone else who wants to do grad school now?
Yeah, it was not easy getting started in the middle of a pandemic. I didn't live in London. I had to move here, and it's kind of tough, when you move to a new city, you're kind of hoping that the people that you'll meet there in your lab, maybe you'll make friends with people in your lab, or at least at the very least at school. But it's really tough when everything is over Zoom and there's not really any chance for kind of organic conversation in these lab meetings, or just chance interactions in the hallway with people at the lab and stuff like that. So it's kind of been weird that way. And that's not easy. I know a lot of people have been struggling with that, and it's definitely tough. But what I would say is, the same is probably true both outside of COVID and during COVID. Take advantage of as many opportunities to network and go and meet people as possible. Go to these neurosocials, or even if they're online, you're still able to meet people that maybe then those relationships can carry over even after COVID is done, and you do get still to have at least kind of some social interactions, even though it's not really the same. But yeah, to take advantage of as many of these things as you can, because you never know who you'll meet, right? You never know, you might be meeting future collaborators, or if I had never gone to that conference, then I never would have met Jody as my supervisor, and I might have ended up with some completely different experience that here at Western that wasn't for me, right? So just going out there, putting yourself out there, meeting people, and finding out what they're interested in. I think those are really key things, whether you're in a pandemic or not. Yeah.
That was very positive. I like that. That's kind of feel good, Have you found that it's been difficult in the pandemic to conduct your research? I mean, obviously you need participants and stuff. So have you been able to do anything with participants, or has it kind of been stalled?
Yeah, it's been rough. So we were able to get some participants in the beginning. But of course, because we were still in the pilot phase, trying to figure out how we want to do this, because it's so new. So we have a lot of things that we need to kind of figure out, make changes to, and that kind of thing. So each participant that we did, we kind of had to make more changes and add in new things or take away new things. And so we don't have any participant pool that is where all the variables are the same yet, which is kind of frustrating, but we do have some data to work with. It's just, it's not publishable data, if that makes any sense. It's just kind of, we're on a scouting mission through the data to analyze all this stuff and find something interesting, but we haven't been able to test in a while, and it's rough to not have, there's so many things that you want to look for and do, but we're very lucky in that we're doing something that's so complex. We have so much data that we can work with, even with one participant. So we've been keeping busy. It's been hard, but we've been keeping busy, and we're hoping for no more extensions on the lockdown things so that we can start testing again. But yeah,
Who are you aiming to get in the study? Is anybody, anywhere, or particular ages, sex, experience? What kind of people are you looking to have join?
We're hoping for, to get a lot of diversity in it. We don't have any strict age requirements or anything like that. It's just more or less the basic kind of MRI requirements and exclusionary criteria. And then other than that, we're not looking, any 18 to 65, right? We want male, female, like we want as diverse as we can get, because, we really want to make sure that we're picking up any connections or anything, networks that we find of interest, that we want to make sure that these really are solid and tangible, and it's not just limited to a specific age group or a gender or whatever. So yeah, as diverse as we can get, that's what we're going for.
I like that. So then maybe when you come out of this, it'll be as generalizable as it can be.
Yeah.
I'm wondering now, I feel like we'd be remiss to not ask, because you said you are a gamer yourself and you're doing this gaming thing and you have these a lot of ideas of what you would want to do going forward, and now you're in the piloting phase, so you're doing the building the foundation for what feels like it's going to be many years of cool research going forward with video games. What's your favorite video game? What do you play?
Gosh, so I have quite a few favorite video games. I think probably my favorite would be The Witcher 3. Would be my favorite, but it's not a competitive video game, so it would not be applicable in the scanner, sadly. I mean, there's different genres. I've been thinking about what game I would want to take next into the scanner and what would be a good candidate, and some of the other things I could do. I think what would be really interesting would be to look at cooperative games and versus competitive games, because there's been some interesting research about social dynamics in cooperation versus competition that you can find in the scanner. So that might be something interesting, but another thing that would be really cool would be to get the 3D version of Pac-Man kind of as not a control, but as, kind of an extension to see, do we see the same effects when we bring this into a 3D landscape versus a 2D landscape, right? I think that would be something really cool for next direction. But yeah, so these are all just brainstorming things I've been kind of, that go through my mind, but yeah.
Very cool. Are those things that you want to work on as well in your MA, or that you'd want to do a PhD with, or what do you think?
Gosh, I mean, so
I put you on the spot.
Yeah, so I feel like this project that I've been working on right now is something that I think you could spend a lifetime trying to wade through all of this data, because it really is so much. There's so many angles you can come at it from. But in terms of what I might want to think about doing in the future, I'm really interested in the way, if we could take this data that we're getting here and get some kind of sense of what, I don't want to say normal, but average functional connectivity for an average person, right? If we could kind of map out cognition and what healthy cognition looks like when you're doing certain activities, there's real implications where you could take this into the medical sphere and start using it to maybe get early diagnoses for things like Parkinson's or schizophrenia or things like that. If you start to see abnormalities in this functional connectivity, this might be an area that you could take it that way. And I've kind of thought maybe that might be something I would be open to doing in the future, is a combined PhD MD, where you could then down the road maybe even start doing some clinical trials with things like this. So I know that's really ambitious and it's way kind of down the road, but that's definitely something that's really kind of crossed my mind, is what are why do this, right? It's fun, it's video games and stuff, but what can you actually get out of this research? And I think there is a lot that could be used to actually be useful to people and stuff like that. So that's a possibility for the future. Maybe.
Well, thanks, Emily, for coming and tell us about your work. It sounds like it's going to be really cool, really fun for both you and the participants. And we're glad that you could tell us about it. If other people want to find out more about you and your work, where can they get a hold of you?
So that you could, I'm not on social media because I'm just, it's distracting. But you can email me if you have any questions, or if you're at Western, you want to come be a participant after all this. My email is ejdavidson, DAVIDSON, 777 @gmail.com. You can email me there, and if you have any questions or anything like that.
Cool. Maybe you'll get some recruits for the study.
Wouldn't that be nice? We want lots of people.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks.
This has been Gradcast, the official radio show and podcast of the Society of Graduate Students here at Western University. I've been your host, Ariel Frame, with my co-host, Rosemary Giles. We've been speaking with Emily Davidson, and this episode will be produced also by me. If you want to get involved in the show, you want to be a guest or get involved in the committee, you can email us at gradcastradio@gmail.com. If you want to hear some of our archived episodes, they're available on our website, gradcast.ca, on wherever podcasts are available, and select episodes are on YouTube. If you want to check us out on social media, we have Instagram, we have Twitter, we have Facebook. It's all at Gradcast Radio. So check us out there, listen to some of our past episodes. Thanks for listening.